to say good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Business Insights. This is the first first event of day 2. Business Insights slightly caught us all by surprise as well, obviously, when we had to move the Gloucester Business Show, but it's been phenomenally well received here in Gloucestershire and with our other supporters. So we had a really good day yesterday. We had a number of these Zoom presentations, and I don't know if any of you caught any of the live stream coming out of Dean Close, but we had a couple of really good sessions down there. So welcome, I'm Pete Allison. I run the Gloucester Business Show, South Gloucester Business Show. Jill, who's on screen with you, is working very closely with us on all of the projects, but coordinating all the forums and all the Zoom work basically for Insights. And having developed this Business Insights online, and many of our supporters, followers, really warm to it. We realised also it gives us a crossover between the geographically territory shows we do, and so we think we might well turn this into an annual Festival of Business and Innovation, but we're going to have that discussion, an online one, just like we did the territory. We'll have that discussion next week. So I apologise in advance. I've got to, once I've stopped speaking here, I've got to dash over to Dean Close School in the Bacon Theatre and do an introduction for our first session there, which is about emotional intelligence and customer feedback. So I will switch my video and audio off, but I will be listening to you for a little bit while I can, and then I'll quietly exit stage left and go to Dean Close. So have a great time, and over to somewhere between Jill and Richard. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everybody. So I'm Richard Holling, and my background is finance and technology, and I've got two very interesting people for the discussion this morning. I've got Anne from Muse Corporation. I first met Anne in 2018 at a networking event, and also we have Fleming, who is CEO of Nimble, and I met Fleming, or got to know Fleming through another networking meeting. So there's definitely something to be said for networking. Anyway, so Anne, could you just quickly introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, my name is Anne Giuliano. Run Muse. We provide short-term cash flow insight by plugging into your accounting and banking data, and then provide finance if you need it through invoice finance.
And Fleming.
Hi, Fleming Bankson. I'm the founder and CEO of Nimble. Nimble is a new way to operate for trade credit insurance. So in single invoice insurance is kind of what we pioneered, and fundamentally right now I don't have to sell it too hard. If your customer's going to go insolvent and not pay your invoices, we pay out. But there's a link into what Anne does in that we often help you get access to invoice finance by providing the cover on the receivables that you're getting that finance against.
Thank you. So I've known you both for a couple of years, and you're both very passionate about the businesses that you run. So Fleming, what drove you to actually start Nimble? Because there's got to be a bit of background there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the family business was food wholesale. So you can probably tell by my name that my father was a Dane, and he came to this country in the 50s and started importing Danish food. So herrings and Danish butter cookies, if anybody remembers those, back in the 70s. And as a food wholesaler, he came up against all sorts of problems. He supplied into the supermarket multiples, where he complained about the fact that he was being used as a bank by the supermarkets and not being paid on time. But he also had these problems where, you know, you'd have a small cash and carry, or even a corner store where you could be delivering goods to, and then one day you'd turn up, or the delivery driver would turn up, and the company wasn't there anymore, and you knew that was going to be a hole in your finances. So that was the kind of where the environment that I grew up in. I then spent many years working in finance in the city. I had a few sort of little startups of my own along the way, and encountered the similar problems, I should say. And then I finally sort of took the leap away from the city and from finance, and I actually threw myself into an invoice discounting platform. And while I was doing that, I encountered trade credit insurance, and I realized that the product was just not there. It was such a great idea, such a really fundamentally, it was the solution to many problems for SMEs, but it didn't really fit SMEs. It's a very complex, very time-consuming product, both to purchase in the first place, but also to administer. And that's when the light bulb came on. And I realized that, if we could design a very simple digital product, we could really get this product to SMEs. And, right now is probably no more true than ever, that SMEs need this product to protect themselves from insolvency of their customers.
Thanks. I think it's really important that people understand that your background is working as a, if you like, in the real world and not just in the city. I think that gives people a good context. And Anne, I mean, I know when we first met in Victoria, you seemed very passionate about what you were setting out. So can you tell us more about your journey?
Sure. So I have 20 years experience in finance, and in 2014 launched investment management and advisory firm here in the UK. And although we had a small staff, I spent maybe 2 days a week managing cash flow, understanding when we would get paid on certain invoices that we had outstanding. And I found that process something, A, I couldn't outsource to anyone else, and be very frustrating. And when I looked more into the issue, I saw that, over 50% of small businesses actually go on personal savings to fund the business because they have fixed expenses, yet they're unsure of when people will pay them. And it's not that it's a bad business, it's just that they're not getting the cash in time. And then personally, while running that business, I was extremely frustrated with the onboarding and being able to work with the banks and find better solutions. And just thought there had to be something better out there. So the number one was make the visualization in the next 30 days easier, because I felt that accounting packages were very complicated. Sometimes external accountants don't even want their business owners to be looking at their accounting package. So that's really what we do, is give you a visual into it, and then B, give quick access to cash. So you've seen a lot through COVID. Banks can take 4, 5, 6 weeks to give the funding that a business needs. And at that point, that could be too late. And so what we do is, at the moment, we aim to release funding within 1 to 2 days. We'd like to move that to within minutes over time. But, for us, the big thing is just getting the capital, getting capital to businesses quicker.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there. I noticed in a briefing message I had this morning from the Council of Finance Brokers that only 25% of SME owners are able to avoid dipping into their personal savings at the moment to keep their businesses afloat. So that's 75% of quite a large number in the UK are either taking a pay cut or are taking savings out to keep their business afloat. So I think that's a message that really resonates at the moment.
And it really shouldn't be that way, right? Like these are good businesses. They shouldn't have to dip into personal savings or put the family at risk. That's why, instead of taking external debt, selling an asset makes sense, and that asset in this case is the invoice.
Absolutely. So as we move on now, so what do you think of the critical challenges facing SMEs at the current time? I mean,
It's a challenging period. I don't think anyone really has a crystal ball of what's going to happen. I think the fact the government shutdowns obviously have a major impact, and the most important thing is getting clarity on when businesses can open and operate again as they used to. You have some businesses that have done quite well out of this, but you have a large amount of businesses that have struggled and are trying to get back on their feet. So I think at the moment it's really trying to figure out what that landscape's going to look like come September, October, and is the UK going to be open for business?
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'd also add to that in that it's the uncertainty is the biggest thing, right? I've spoken to a lot of small businesses recently who've been wondering whether it's even worth taking, CBILS and all these things, because they don't even know whether their businesses are going to be viable in 6 to 12 months time. And I think it's a very, very stressful time, but it's also, I think most of the solutions that are out there are debt related. Debt tends to not make companies more viable in the long term. And I think, a lot of people kind of can't see past the fact that actually becoming more and more leveraged, even if you survive on the other side, it's going to become, it's going to send a lot of companies under, if not in the short term, also in the longer term. So it's a very unpleasant time, I think, for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that the companies that I'm talking to that have reached out for the bounce back loans and the CBILS loans, I mean, they're not doing it because they want to. As I've said to a number of people, nobody's borrowing money at the moment because they want to borrow money. Nobody's borrowing money for expansion and new equipment. They're borrowing it to keep their staff and keep the lights on. So if we look at that environment, I mean, one of the reasons we set up this panel was to talk about the new world. And originally, we started to put the panel together before the lockdown. And obviously, you're both involved in new technology, and you're taking a new approach to the environment. So, Fleming, can you just explain perhaps how some of the new trends in technology are enabling some of the things that you're doing? In particular, we've talked things like cloud accounting, open banking, but there may be other things that Nimble are using that allows you to operate better now than, say, you would have done 15 years ago.
Yeah, sure. So I guess, open banking and cloud accounting are a really good place to start. I think that very much similar to what Anne was just saying, a lot of small businesses, they don't get the credit that they deserve a lot of the time, because there isn't the transparency into their business. If you go to a credit bureau, for example, most small businesses will be rated on one of those kind of metrics, i.e. how long they've been around for, what sector they're in, and very little about the real company. And let's not forget that what's filed at Companies House is fairly thin, and it's usually incredibly out of date by the time it's filed. So if you're going on that kind of data, you're not really getting a very accurate picture of small businesses, and therefore you have to be extremely conservative about the nature of that business and the credit worthiness of that business. So what we do is we allow businesses to effectively get the right credit, in terms of we can assess their credit worthiness by connecting their cloud accounting, and that way we can also offer the right price to their suppliers to credit insure them. So at the moment that's very, very critical, because if you think about it, just from a very simple point of view, let's take a pub, right? Now, a pub that was perfectly viable 6 months ago is very likely not viable now, depending on what's gone on. And if you're a supplier into that pub, do you want to deliver a pallet full of beer or whatever on credit at the moment? You'd probably be thinking about it. But of course, that pub also needs that. They need that trade credit in order to get going, because that's more money that they're going to have to raise if they have to pay for it up front. So what we're allowing them to do is to say, okay, the buyer, the pub, can connect their cloud accounting, and we can give them a genuine rating on that company. And so we can then offer the credit insurance to the supplier, and the supplier can give it on credit. Now, what's important about that is in 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, no insurer could do that because it's all human-based, right? It just doesn't work now. Our minimum premium is £5.60, right? And if you put a human in the process, then clearly that's not going to work. So by having automated underwriting, we can allow that to happen, and we can sell a policy for £5, £10, £20, because it's fully automated, and we're taking that data and we're pulling it into our underwriting model, and we can spit out a price. And that supplier can just say, okay, I'm going to pay £15, secure this particular transaction, and make sure that I get paid.
Okay, so it's definitely. I mean, it does sound like, you know, companies putting all their accounts into the cloud, giving companies like yourself access. It's a virtuous circle. The more that they share, the better information you have, you know, and then in turn that, you know, it helps them with, you know, with their suppliers. Yeah. So, yeah. And you've also you know, built some technology behind Muse. Can you just talk us through some of that?
Sure. It's similar, but maybe purposed for a bit of a different reason, but all for the same goal. So we'll connect into the cloud accounting package and into the banking data using Openbanking to see what's coming into the ledger and allow the individuals to select which invoices they want to fund. And then what we'll do is we're able to cross-check that information with the banking data to confirm that this is a real invoice, that this invoice makes sense to the patterns of that business. So one of the issues with invoice finance historically has been the amount of fraud within it. And as a result, the pricing has been, you know, quite aggressive or maybe unattractive to business owners. Because we're able to automatically pull in the data and then cross-reference it and get comfortable, very much like Fleming was saying, we're able to offer better pricing or more attractive pricing. And because it's automated, we're able to do it at levels that are lower than what a traditional bank would do, you know, with in order to provide funds.
Okay, so it sounds, you know, Fleming and Anne, that the use of technology is sort of changing the parts of the finance industry that you're in. And I guess, you know, some people who've been around for a while will have either got experience with factoring from 20 years ago, and I guess with credit insurance, Fleming, as well, that, you know, people's past experiences aren't necessarily a reflection of what's available now. That, you know, the industry's, you know, move forward, and challenges like Muse and Nimble are driving that, which is good to hear. I mean, my own personal feeling about these things like open banking and cloud accounting is that we're only really at the start, and I've been in sort of accounting systems on and off for 30 years, and I remember in the early 90s, big companies adopting some of the technologies that are now available to small companies and paying, you know, millions of dollars for that sort of thing. And I think now, you know, a few £100 and people can have pretty comprehensive systems that can move them forward. So just going back to you, Anna, it's about touching on that, some of that history. Factoring has got a bit of a mixed reputation. I know when I talk to my potential clients about it, I can often get some comments. I mean, what would you say that your companies have to be aware of if they're looking to have a relationship or select a factoring company?
Yes, I guess part of the goal for me is to change the people's impressions of factoring or invoice finance as being a last resort, but actually being a stable product where, like Fleming was mentioning before, debt products are not great for businesses because that is just going to compound how much they're paying out of their pocket. Versus if the businesses are selling an asset and not putting themselves at additional risk. And really invoice finance and factoring allow for that. I think historically the products have been really aggressively priced. And that's because of, even now you see some of the traditional providers are asking for paper statements, management accounts, etc., which is like a very onerous process. You have some of the large banks have teams of people doing hand reconciliation at the end of the month. So they need to find a way to on-charge that. I think from my perspective, streamlining this business as much as possible and making it appear like almost an overdraft account for a business is going to be kind of the way forward, and what we're looking to achieve over the next couple of years.
Okay, so automation and technology is sort of driving out of costs from your business, and you're able to pass that on to your clients, and that's what people should be looking for. Yeah.
Right, exactly, and reframing the conversation. It's not with regards to how you access the funding and the ease of the access of the funding. I think if it's structured more like an overdraft where you can dip in and out of it, that it maybe becomes less onerous than this 5-week process historically that a factoring might have taken.
Okay. And Fleming, similarly for you, I mean, trade credit, as you mentioned, has been around for a while for bigger companies. But so if somebody was entering the market now and looking for a partner, what would you suggest that they have to look for?
Yeah, so now's a very interesting time. I guess to give you. I'll give you a little story. When I started the business, when I started doing research on the business, went into the East End of London and talked to people in the rag trade, right? So market, all of those clothing companies that are sat out in the East End of London. And whenever I mentioned that we wanted to talk to them about trade credit insurance, they were basically trying to kick us out of the door. They were absolutely furious. And when I finally managed to sort of convince someone that I wasn't, one of those guys or the VAT man, they kind of sat me down, and one guy, he was very, very kind. He sat me down and he said, look, this is why everyone hates you. And I said, well, it's not me. I've only just started in this industry, but tell me why. And he said, well, a lot of us bought these policies back in the crisis, well, pre-crisis, right, as in the 2008. And then when it came round to the crisis, they'd paid all of this money for these policies up front, and then all the insurers did was pull all of their limits, right? So they said, well, what on earth have we paid for? We've paid for all of these limits, which you then take away from us. So fundamentally what our product is, it's non-cancelable, right? So we can't offer you limits out till forever, but what you do get is what you pay for. So you only pay for what's on risk, right? So as you issue an invoice, you pay for it. You pay to cover that invoice. Now we kind of give you some sort of projections. We kind of like, we will tell you if the creditworthiness of your customers is deteriorating, because at some point, of course, we can't insure the next invoice because it's become too risky. And right now, we're right in the heart of exactly that problem, where we will insure stuff, and we'll try and insure as much as we possibly can. But of course, there are some companies that we all know are going to the wall, and therefore we'd be daft, and our business wouldn't be viable if we continue to insure those businesses. So so what we feel is that it's just a little bit more transparent, and that's again where the technology comes in. It becomes easier for you to administer the policy because we have that connectivity. We can see that there's no fraudulent behavior. We can also see that that you've got history with that customer, and we can see that that those invoices are live, and we can pull those invoices in and insure them for you. So I think it's really about just being open, right? And not selling something that you can't actually live up to. So we live by the mantra of like pay as you trade, effectively.
Okay, well, that's quite interesting. I mean, I've heard that as background over the last 12 months as companies have gone down that slippery slope towards insolvency. That one of the critical factors has been people being able to get credit insurance for their suppliers. And when that's been pulled, it's had a devastating effect on them. And I guess the same goes for those suppliers. If you've got big contracts and suddenly your limits are halved, then what do? You want to keep your customer going if you can, but you've got to be, you're at risk.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is where the government reinsurance scheme, really comes in, because I don't know whether people are aware. It's not probably not on the front page, but there's a government reinsurance scheme that's just been announced. That's it's £10 billion, and it will effectively be a reinsurance of the insurer for the insurers. Now, the insurers really aren't going to make any money out of this period, so which is, I think that's fair if the government's going to be backstopping them. But it does mean that what we campaigned for was to say, look, there's a potential for a domino effect, because insolvency is basically knocked other companies over, especially at the moment, because so many companies, smaller companies in particular, are much more vulnerable because they've just had all their reserves depleted effectively. So one decent sized invoice knocking them over could tip them over as well, and you just get this domino effect.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that really hasn't made the papers much. I mean, the bounce back loans and the receivables loans, furlough schemes have all been at the front of mind, but
yeah,
I think the credit insurance, reinsurance, if you like, is really important. I think it's going to have a bigger effect than people perhaps give it credit for.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've just had a question come in. So in terms of the products or the services that you both offer, are they just for sort of medium-sized companies, or do you work with smaller businesses and sole traders? I mean, that's
Yes, we do. Yeah, we accept sole traders. So you can register and go through the whole process through as a sole trader. No different. We prefer it if you have cloud accounting. A lot of our we're in the Starling Bank marketplace, and a lot of those customers are sole traders.
Okay. And how about you, Anne?
Yes, we focus our core focus are on small businesses. So from that perspective, I guess that's what you look at as micro. But yes, that's why the having the links into the cloud accounting is important. So
yeah, I know from the discussion we had before that you were again passionate about bringing factoring down to an invoice finance down to those smaller businesses which currently don't have access. So.
Right, and you've definitely seen that recently as well, with everything happening with the different programs out there, that the larger businesses are getting served faster by the banks and by their relationships. So really the part of the market that's hurting the most are the small businesses or the sole traders.
Okay, so just sort of broadening the conversation, I think one of the things that I've encountered talking to a lot of small businesses is that they like to understand a bit more about what drives people and sort of their background and their sort of passions. So Anne, you've got you're not just running Muse. You're juggling a number of things. So I mean, are you willing to share any of that with people? Because I think that's interesting that they're everyday challenges that other women in business sort of face, and I think I think people like to know those sort of things.
Well, I have a 2.5-year-old son, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
So it's been interesting with COVID. I think the first couple weeks of lockdown, you might have seen like a box, something walking with a box on its head in the background. But yeah, I think, both my husband and I work. So it's been a bit of a juggle. I think what it's just meant is that, our days have become extremely long. We'll start early in the morning, have to take care of a few things, and then it goes much later than I think.
Yeah.
Historically.
I think it's interesting. I think people. One of the things that it's become clear to me over the last 12 months is that people like to relate to people and understand a bit more about them, because some of those challenges are exactly the same challenges that business is facing as well, and it just makes things a bit rounder. And Fleming, I know you. I mean, when I first met you, you were juggling life between London and Denmark. I've sort of lost track as to where your family is now, but.
No, we're all back here. That was quite a difficult one. But no, my wife was working for the WHO and over there, and the kids were over there, and so I was commuting back and forth. And she's now working for the WHO remotely here in London. So they're two. We seem to be right in the eye of the storm, quite frankly, between us. So. She's actually on a call next door, so we're just hoping the kids don't run in to either of them.
Well, this isn't the BBC News, so I mean, I think.
Well, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting one of Fleming's children on one of our calls a few weeks ago. Such is the way of the world right now.
Indeed, yeah. It'd be lovely to meet in person at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, we've known it. The three of us have known each other on and off the site for a couple of years. Now, I'm conscious that we've not actually got that many people in the call, but so Andrew and Rhiannon, I just wonder, Jill, whether or not we wanted to open their mics and just see if Andrew or Rhiannon, if you've got any questions that you might want to put to Anne or myself or Fleming, make this a bit more interactive than we perhaps would have done with a larger audience.
Hi Richard, I'm Andy Phillips. I know Gabriel. I worked with Gabriel at Growth Street. I'm now a traditional invoice finance house, Optimum SME Finance. Being an old-fashioned bank manager, I must admit, I am brought into what the fintechs are bringing to the marketplace. We ourselves insist on credit insurance at the moment because of the marketplace on any funding that we do. And yeah, what Fleming says is spot on. And one of my frustrations is the insurance houses that we are working with. It's getting insured limits for debtors. It's the biggest problem that SMEs are finding at the moment. As you say, because a lot of the credit protection insurers are working on historic data filed at Companies House. Again, I like what Anne and Muse are doing and bringing to the marketplace. I saw that at Grove Street. It was a wonderful product. There were one or two issues there that I don't need to go into. However, I can't believe that you take away the human factor altogether, because to me, SMEs and businesses, the most critical thing about that is the people behind the business. From my days in the dim distant past working at a bank, the insistence on cash flow forecasts and things like that the banks will still ask for is, to me, it's a waste of time, because as you say, it is current data you want to work with, but more importantly, it's the people behind the business. Cloud accounting is fine, but it's only as good as the information that's being put in by the SMEs. And so many SME owners, to be honest, haven't a clue what they're doing when it comes to accounting packages. I know one of the problems we had at Grove Street was a lot of the data being put in by the finance people within the SMEs just didn't make sense, and therefore the data we were getting out didn't make sense, which restricted our funding. I can see Muse attracting and being very attractive to the younger set who like to do everything on their iPads, iPhones. However, so many of the traditional SMEs still like to do it the old-fashioned way and still like the personal contact. And I don't know how you're going to overcome that, or how either of you, because both your services are very much IT driven, how you're going to overcome and sell that to the older generation, or even, you know, those that still like that human contact.
Okay, so I'm Rhiannon and I work for Hazelwood's, one of the larger firms of accountants in the area, and I'm very much in favour of cloud accounting. Take on board the issues that you sometimes have with data input by clients who think they know what they're doing but don't necessarily. I have a number of clients that use invoice factoring, and part of the reason for my call is to find out a little bit more about the alternatives to the more traditional factoring model, which can be quite onerous in terms of reconciliations needing to be provided and that sort of stuff on a monthly basis. But we're finding more and more that clients don't actually get the human touch with bank managers and things like that. So I think they are engaging a lot more with online platforms, and I think there is a gap in the market, as you've said, Anne, with Muse, that but it's all about ensuring that clients and, you know, small businesses know how to keep their accounting records properly so that they get meaningful information out.
Well, that's quite interesting. I mean, this is it's good that we've got people that actually, well, an accountant and somebody who's also from the industry. This makes it a slightly different panel, if you like, to one where we've got a dozen SMEs. So Anne Fleming, I don't know who wants to take first, but that balance between technology and the personal touch, I think is a valid point. I mean, it is something that I must admit I like to deal with humans as much as I do like to deal with technology, but probably more so actually.
Yeah, I guess I'll throw my piece in. I totally agree. It's one of the reasons that we put a lot of, one of the first things we did was set up what's called customer success these days, but, you know, we all know it as customer service or, you know, support, because our customers do like to do things over the phone. They do like to speak. It's also something I, as a risk person, believe in, what I call the sniff test. You can basically, you know, you can root out a lot of sort of fishy behaviour by talking to people, and there's a strong element of that in terms of sort of rooting out frauds and things like that. So I don't think it will go away. I don't think people will actually want to just have a digital piece, but what we find is that there's a peak at the beginning where you have a lot of human contact, and then it starts to go down, and that's really there's two parts to that. The first is trust, and especially as an insurer, and for some of the reasons that I mentioned before, we have quite a, you know, there's a mountain to climb sometimes in terms of winning that trust that's perhaps been lost previously. But the second part is process. It's trying to build it into their processes so that it's very slick. We want it to work seamlessly and without them having to do anything, and that's where the technology comes in. And they also want it to work seamlessly. So we had all sorts of brilliant ideas when we first started, and, you know, our platform looked had graphs and things all over the place. But what we very quickly realised was that actually most SMEs don't really care that much about insurance. They just want to come in, insure it, and disappear again. So we streamlined the whole process in that sense. So I think, but to the point around data, yes, we have to do a lot of filtering. But what we try to encourage our customers with is that, look, if you get your data and you get your process slick, it's actually going to improve your business, and it's going to improve the price of our product. So just to give you a really quick example of that, right? If you're hot on your credit control and you get your invoices paid on time, or near enough to on time as you possibly can, if you're on top of that process, we're going to give you a better price.
Right, so so it's getting that, the more that people use the technology and keep it up to date, and I think that's a learning process. People are getting used to it, and obviously automatic feeds from bank accounts, help with that, and some of the AI that's built into some of these accounting packages is going to assist the SMEs. Yeah, and Anne, how about you? Because you have two types of customers that you're working with, really, don't you? So
I think the big picture is, I'm very much a people person. So I think the thing that I've struggled most with the lockdown is not being able to see and meet people. And I completely agree with you, Andrew. There's a human element to this that you're never going to take away or automate. And as Fleming has set up his service desk, it's an important component to anything. When you have a question, you want to be able to talk to someone and feel comfortable that they're there. But so what does the technology do? It just allows you to have those conversations because it frees up the other operational things that otherwise you would be doing manually. So some of the banks that we're working with on our technology literally have 30 people hand reconciling the accounts at the end of the month. You don't need those 30 people to do that if you automate it. And so you can actually use those people to do more of that customer success or, customer acquisition strategy. For on the accounting side, I personally think accounting packages are really challenging to deal with. I'm not an accountant, and one of my biggest frustrations is going in and keeping it updated, and that's why I have a good accountant that does that. And I think to what Rihanna was saying earlier is, your accountant can keep your system up to date for you, or you can find other tools to help you do that, so that the business owner is not really the one responsible for it. I think just the bigger picture is that information's updated so that we can get good data to be able to do that underwriting quickly. But I don't think that human element, I don't think you can ever replace it. I think it's an important component.
No, I think it absolutely is. I think it's getting that balance right. I mean, you can't serve all customers. Yeah, if somebody's only financing small invoices or insuring small invoices, there's not enough money to give that full service. So it is a balancing act. But I think sometimes if you give that service even to a very small customer, they talk about it, and that has a multiplying effect in terms of the value of it. Rhiannon, I'm going to, clearly you are working with cloud accounting packages, and has Hazelwood got an app advisory business?
No, it's something that we're working on currently. So we're trying to build an app stack as we speak. So putting in tools that we find that our clients will find most useful. But it's been quite an interesting part of the journey, really. So we started out really gung-ho that we'd have all these apps that clients would be able to use. The majority of small businesses don't actually need them. So what we're looking at doing is, alongside the accounting package, having a cash flow forecasting system and one or two other things, but on the whole, the accounting packages do most of what SMEs are likely to require, unless they've got something a bit more complex.
Just one,
Yeah, I mean,
just one quick comment for me as well, because obviously we deal with micros and sole traders. Is what we recommend them to do is to really think about using a bookkeeper, because bookkeepers are, they're a much better price point, than a full qualified accountant, but the bookkeepers can make sure that the data that then Anne and Phil are looking for at least stands some chance of being in a reasonably well structured chart of accounts.
Interestingly, actually, and our team at Hazelwoods are, we have an outsourcing team and we're priced at bookkeeper charges actually, so because otherwise we're just not competitive in the market. So
well, yeah, I think it's a useful. Not all accountants are the same, are they? So let's.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch as well, and I think going at the app stack. When I started my business back in September, I think if I'd have taken all the apps that were recommended to me in the accounting services, I'd have had more expenses than I had revenue coming into the company.
Yeah.
It was very easy to spend several £100s on apps before you even started, and I found just having Sage was enough. It's not got everything I need, perhaps, if I was running a business with a turnover of a couple of million, but in terms of for what I do, it's plenty good in
and there's plenty of firms out there that specialize in app stacks, so we link with one or two other sort of firms who that's their specialty. So if we have clients that are on a cloud system and need something like a more or singing or dancing inventory system, for example, we'd put them in touch with one of the app experts out there rather than trying to gain the knowledge of all the apps ourselves. So we rely on there's plenty of experts in the marketplace that we can refer to.
Okay, all right. So we've just got 5 or 10 minutes left to take us up to the hour. Now this actual event was put together at very short notice in terms of advertising to a potential audience, and although we had a dozen people signed up as of yesterday morning, there was a problem with the ticketing system over the last 24 hours, which meant that people couldn't register, unfortunately. This is probably a precursor to the event we're running in November, where we'll have 2 panels. One panel is going to be around fintechs for fintechs, is the way I would express it, because I know in South Gloucestershire and Cheltenham in particular, there's the cyber community and people looking at technology, and there's people who may be considering fintech as a marketplace or entering that market. And then the second panel will be more like this one, talking about the use of technology and alternative finance for SMEs. So before we finish, I'd like to ask just Rhiannon, I guess a question to you more so than Andrew, but Andrew, you might want to chip in, is for that panel in November, where we'll probably have a slightly, we'll have more panel members than just Fleming and Anne. What would make it attractive, not necessarily to you, but to your potential clients, and put you in a position where you might recommend one of your clients came to that event?
But probably just having a breadth of experience on the panel. I quite like the sound of the alternative finance, and I think that could be attractive to some of our businesses, particularly the ones coming out at the end of COVID-19. We're taking the tack as a firm of seeing it as an opportunity for growth for businesses, because for some businesses it will be, it's not all, it'll be doom and gloom for lots and lots, but not for everybody. So it'll be probably targeting at the businesses that we feel are going to start to take off a little bit. So having finance that's not necessarily the debt finance traditionally of old would be quite good.
Okay, interesting.
I would agree with that. I know it's shooting myself in the foot, but I'm a great believer in the fintechs and the alternative funding market that's coming through, and I think that's the way forward. Coming out of this, I can see the banks tightening their doors, and even to those businesses that survive, the banks have a tendency to tar everyone within a sector with the same brush, and therefore I think a lot of existing SMEs and businesses are going to struggle to find funding through the traditional routes, and this is where the alternative market is going to come into play, and it's their opportunity. The biggest problem is getting that message out to clients and having forums like this, like your suggestion in November, the more of those alternative funders that you can have on that panel will make it more attractive, because it is their route to market. That's the biggest problem a lot of these fintechs have got, is route to market and getting the name out there. They haven't got the budgets of the Barclays and the Lloyds to spend. So it is word of mouth and these sort of forums that help them.
No,
Yeah,
I would think, Richard, as well, is the thing that I think one of the things I was hearing, listening to everybody, is that some of this is that I think for this, we deal very much with the micros and the sole traders, is they don't know what they don't know. So the whole idea of even being able to get any finance or insurance is just something it doesn't even cross their radar necessarily. So I think part of the forums part of what we want to be doing at the show is, it's that sort of accessibility, isn't it, based on knowledge, as opposed to, if you know to go and look, you go and look, but if you don't know to go and look, you continue taking out your savings.
Well, yeah, and I think mine and Anne and Fleming's, our background, we've been in and out of technology and finance for a lot of our careers. I mean, even though we're running small businesses now, and you forget how much you actually know intrinsically because you've been in that industry. But I think both Fleming and Anne have said, Anne will finance a £5,000 or £10,000 invoice, which is definitely on the in an affordable way for a very small SME. And Fleming's already said that his lowest policy price is £5.60. I think you said, Fleming.
Yes, yeah.
So that makes it affordable. And if people are thinking that credit if with a new client, particularly at the moment, for £5.60, why it's just not worth the risk if you're taking on a new client and you're unsure, and just even asking for a policy and getting an answer back that you can actually get a policy gives you a bit more confidence than if you ask for a policy and you find out you can't get one. It makes you think twice anyway. So there's a service there.
I suppose I'm thinking their knowledge is even earlier than that. They don't even know to ask for a policy.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. And that's partly mine and Rhiannon's job to put people right on that. Okay, so I don't want us to just get to the cliff edge and just drop off. So we've got just a few minutes to go. So just in terms of closing remarks, firstly, I'd just like to thank Fleming and Anne for being on my panel. I'm very grateful to you both. You're both go-to people for me in terms of these sort of events, and I'm very appreciative and thankful of your support. To me personally, over the last couple of years, I've got to know you quite well, and so thanks for being on the panel. Anne, anything you'd like to say in sort of closing to the group? And bear in mind that some other people might see this when we put it edit it and put it on the internet.
Great. Well, I think thank you very much for having me, and it was great to meet everyone here. I definitely have to second what Andrew and Rihanna are saying with regards to cash flow management and alternative lending. I think September, October, that it's going to be important for businesses to know what they have from an alternative lending perspective. And hopefully we can be here to help them. Yeah.
Great. I'm sure you'll be around. And Fleming?
Yeah, just if you've got any questions around the creditworthiness of your customers and you're worried, come talk to us, come see the platform. It's free to get credit ratings on your customers. So just have a look and, just beware of those risks at the moment. It's going to be a very, very tumultuous period. So it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times, and it's certainly interesting times at the moment.
Yeah, yes.
It's a curse, not a blessing.
Right. As a quick side note, Fleming's platform is super easy to get a price on an invoice and know how much you'll pay for it. It takes seconds. So there's no reason why not to just price it out of curiosity.
Fleming, do you joint insure? So if I had a client who we wanted to lend to, but they couldn't get traditional credit insurance through, let's say, someone like AIG or COFAS because they're working on traditional means.
Yeah.
I know we have a policy with a provider, but we always ask for joint insurance. If they've got their own credit protection policy, we just ask to cover ourselves for joint insurance. Can you provide that?
We do it through our API, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope it's been an interesting hour for us all. I've certainly found it interesting. And, let's stay in touch, and hopefully we'll all meet face-to-face sometime in the next couple of months. But
That would be nice.
who knows?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for putting it together, John. Bye-bye.